Hello, and thanks for joining today's QE Babble. Today we're talking about test automation, tools or fundamentals. As we can all see, testing is really awash with tools, products and services that often wax lyrical about how they can solve common problems, both old and new. Do a quick search and you'll find there's countless products out there. And as well as all the stalwarts that we all know really well, there's invariably a hatful of young pretenders, all vying for the attention of decision makers in quality teams. But does that all really matter? And has the industry become too focused on using tools over the right processes? That's what we're going to discuss today on QE Babble. So we're going to look at when and where and what to automate and how to prioritize. We're going to look at, should we be regularly changing our tools and is it really necessary? And then we're going to finally look at, if someone wants to learn about test automation, perhaps they've been involved in quality for a while, but they just haven't had that exposure yet, where should they start? And obviously to do that, we've put together a great panel of people, some real experts in this area, to try and help us answer those questions. So without further ado, I will bring in today's panel. A big welcome to you all. Thanks for joining. Rafaela, if I could come to you first, if you just want to briefly introduce yourself and help us answer that first question about how we go about prioritizing in automation.
Yeah, sure. I'm Rafaela. I have 16 years experience in QA right now. But then I became more specialized in test automation. Um, Last year I started my own startup to help developers and QAs, everybody in tech, coding people to just help with their career builder. So this is what we have been doing since last year now. And yeah, just replying your first question about the priorities. The first thing that always comes to my mind is like repetitive tasks. This is definitely something that, kind of things that you need to do over and over just to make sure the happy flow and is working. For example, if you have like an e-commerce, you definitely need to make sure that the person is able to buy the product, right? So this would be something that you definitely need to have in your automation suite. And yeah, some people, they like to put edge cases that are also like, something that if it breaks, then that's it. You cannot do anything. And even though it's not like really common to happen, it's something that is really risky, basically. So yeah, it all depend on the project that you have. Yes or no? but yeah, it's just because it's kind of abstract, right? These things, they depend on the project, the team, and also deadlines. So we need to kind of take these into account when you're prioritizing your tests. But yeah, first thing I would say, the repetitive tasks, definitely. And I'm gonna leave for the others as well to give the inputs. So yeah, maybe Callum.
Yeah, hi. I'm a very sleep-deprived Callum Akehurst-Ryan. I've got 16 years in the industry, working with a number of startups to help embed quality and work with them to build out automation frameworks and to build out their ways of working. I'd just like to firstly address, like I think Lewis here has put a comment in to say, is it just automation by coding? I think we can say that when we mean automation here, there's a whole variety, especially nowadays, of modern automation tooling, including low code to no code. So some of this will be automation through code-based tooling. Some of it will be. Obviously, what we're talking about at the moment is the where, when, and what of automation. And that could be through any of the hows there. So don't make the assumption that we're just talking about a coding tool. I'm sure we'll drive into what tools suit you a bit further on. But when it comes to coverage and what we're trying to test, I see a lot of organizations who need to think about what type of testing do we need to put in at what time in their life cycle. Sometimes teams will want to retrofit automation. And there'll be good parts and there'll be sweet spots, but there'll be really tricky parts as well. For example, if you try to add unit tests to code that just hasn't been written to take it, it's going to take a long time. It's going to be really difficult. Also, if you try to write a load of like massive business tests for something that maybe hasn't been planned to do this as well, you may come up with some really flaky tests for things. What I tend to find is a good place to start, and when I'm looking at coverage, especially for teams that are introducing automation, this is like a new area for them in their testing. I tend to look at things like the API layer, because those requests across APIs are much easier to automate for. It gives you sort of good sort of combination of integration, business logic, but also it's just a really easy thing to think about there as well. So I will pass to Bas.
Thank you. Good day, everybody. First of all, thank you, Matt, for the invite, and thank you, Callum and Rafaela, for joining us as well. My name is Bas. I've been in testing and more specifically in automation for some 18 years now. Engineer, consultant, trainer, occasional blogger. I do loads of things. For me, the question is, and I'm trying not to just repeat everything that Rafaela and Callum already said, but there's loads of truth in there. But my take on it would be, for me, it's basically about answering two questions. First of all, what's the information that we absolutely cannot deal without? Is there anything I need to know before I go? That's the first thing that I want to look at when I start testing in general, but especially and automation is basically just, well, throwing tools at testing problems. So that for me is very important. If I'm prioritizing, what kind of information am I really looking for? What's absolutely vital for me? And the second is, well, and that ties in quite nicely to what Rafaela already said, the boring stuff. How can I use tools to do what I do as a tester in a more efficient way? A lot of focus is on test execution there. A lot of focus is also on end-to-end full stack DOM to database kind of automation. Basically, trying to replicate what a normal human being does through the graphical user interface of an application. But that is, as we all should know, quite an expensive kind. So things that I love testing at the API layer, just like you, Callum, just because it is a nice hybrid between you have a relatively large scope, so you're still relatively close, typically, to end user experience, even though you cut off the graphical user interface layer. But there's lots of business pros and business flows, those kinds of things that you can cover there, and then you're automating against an interface that is. Matt, your door needs oiling.
It's your cat. Oh,
blame the cat. Blame the cat. Blame the door.
I hope that noise was the door and not the cat itself.
Oh.
Do you know?
Good. What I wanted to say is that API layer is it's an interface meant to be consumed by code, by computers, so that makes it inherently a lot more feasible and suitable to automate as well. So those are some of the things that I look into.
But just to build on what you said there as well, I think it depends on the maturity of the product that you're trying to build as well, as to what you'll automate and what level of automation that you'll want. So if you are building something that's a technical demonstrator, if you're in a startup, technical demonstrator, things are changing rapidly. Maybe the back end is more static, maybe the front end is constantly changing. What you need to automate in your scope of automation needs to be really focused on what remains static rather than what's changing all the time. You may have like a really different view of what good automation looks like there. Whereas, let's say you're in a very like e-commerce, very like static website, it needs to look a certain way. You might push your testing into the front end there as well. So I think it's key that although we can say, hey, we like testing at these layers and levels as well, the context of the project that we're working on will mean it depends what we need to consider for our scope of automation.
Yeah. You know what, it's funny because people, I started saying about the scenarios, but of course we have all the layers as well. And it's like a lot bigger than majority of people still think that, okay, you're just thinking about the scenarios. But then you have the API, then you have of course, the unit tests and the end-to-end, which is a nightmare. I also hate that. It's always like kind of flaky, especially, yes, when you are using no-code tools, and they just like create like loads of other codes and like trash that you need to think about the maintenance first after. But yeah, basically it depends on the everything that you guys said already, like the maturity. So if you need something really fast, then maybe the no-code is the best one, and then you need to worry about the maintenance after. But it's like an option that you can take depending on the deadlines and of them.
A lot of it also, and I think we sometimes forget that word when we talk about automation, and we think about coverage, and we want to do everything, is risk. That thing that we sometimes forget considering is, and especially if you go fast and you want to deliver, you typically, and I'm not saying that this is always the case, but typically the risk of breaking existing things is a little bit lower. You may not even care about it that much. So you're more about creating new features, new iterations, improvements, acting on feedback. So you would maybe do your testing in the automation a little less for, especially if you know that your product's going to change in the next hour, day, week, whatever kind of delivery model, delivery heartbeat frequency you're using. So that also, there's so many dimensions to this. You're cruel, Matt, basically.
I know.
Because there is
asked
so
a really
much
broad question.
here.
A really good talk that really speaks to what you're saying there, Bas, is, have you seen Angie Jones's Automate the Right Things? Where she talks about, it's a really good talk for anyone looking at automation and or just generally like what coverage and testing we should have, like speaking about the gut feeling we have of like, should we just cover this, through to like the risk of impact, the value we get from those tests, the cost efficiency of running it and writing it and maintaining it, and also just the history of like whether or not there were problems in that area that we might want to, like you said, like keep checking for. So that's an amazing resource that if anyone's interested in looking at how to improve their coverage or understand what's a good candidate for coverage, I recommend looking at her talk. It's awesome.
Okay, let's make sure we get a link to that, and I'll put it in the comments afterwards. Thank you. Yeah, really useful. Awesome. Yeah, you're right. It is a cruel question. It's cheeky of me, and they do follow a similar theme, and they are all quite broad. But it's given us a chance to come up with some really interesting sort of.
This would have been a very boring panel if it was all just yes/no questions.
It would, and I completely understand what you're saying, that it depends on context, doesn't it? Because really, I've asked when and where and what to automate, but we haven't described what we're talking about. But I think Callum came through with a couple of examples there of sort of scenarios, which is useful. Before we go on to the next question, because I do think this is interesting. Let's say, for example, it's a startup environment, and you are the first boots on the ground from a quality perspective. At what point do you think you would start thinking about using an automated process for your testing?
It presupposes that the organization and the engineers haven't already started down that path, because what I tend to see and what I tend to find is, even if I'm the first tester, boots on the ground, like quality coach or someone with tester in their title, even in that situation, I tend to find that engineers have already started laying the groundwork, thinking about like code testing, unit testing, linting, and some thinking there anyway. So sometimes that thinking's already been done. But what about the other two of you?
Yeah, I actually joined a startup. I was the third employee here, like some couple of years ago. I had to like build the QA from the scratch. They had the product already, actually. And when I joined, of course, I was doing kind of a lot of manual tasks just to understand the product and the maturity and, things that were breaking up a lot. They didn't have too much task coverage. Maybe that's why they hired me at the time. So I could actually start the automation. First I had to do like a benchmark of the tools, what was gonna be better to use, because it was a mobile app and it was just Android. So I had to take all of these into consideration. And also was like Chinese tablets. So, it's not really reliable. So yeah, I had to think about all the strategy created, and then I start to implement. And if I'm not wrong, I took the happy path first, just to make sure that things were not breaking, and then I start to build up from there. But yeah, I don't know if Bas, if you, because you have been in this area for 18 years, so yeah, a long time.
Are you calling me old now?
No, I'm just saying you probably. No, you
No.
probably had
My answer would be that I think a little bit differently. Is basically from day one, or because we're engineers, from day zero. Why? Because I want to do the best testing that I do from day one, and to do that, I'll need tools to do that. And for me, that's automation. It's just using tools to help me do more efficient testing. So I bring in it. So a lot of folks, when we talk about automation, is about automating existing test cases, test scripts, regression test packs, whatever. That might or mightn't be a good thing. That's a whole different question, probably a whole different panel. But for me, it's I want to do the best testing, the most efficient testing that I do as soon as possible, and I'll need tools to do that. So I'll need to think about automation, and some of that I'll maybe just throw away. Again, some of it I'll keep, some of it I'll turn into tests that run over and over and over again. So it's not like first I do testing and then I see, well, these are the test cases that I want to run, and then I start thinking about automation. I'm bringing that in from day zero.
I think an important thing to think about there, Bas, what really resonated with me is that throwaway mentality. Because if I'm going to pick up any sort of tooling or even start writing any sort of characterization or automation tests for a startup specifically, that code base is really changeable. So I'm probably going to just write some really quick and dirty sort of tests that we can then reuse as well. I tend to, if I've come in quite late into an organization, I tend to focus on using tooling for exploration and then taking candidates from that to reuse, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I actually, for this startup that I worked in, the product didn't change too much. It was like gaming kind of, so I was not like automating the games. But there is another example that was not in kind of a startup environment, but the goal of the automation was a bit different, because it was not enough for a long term, and they were more worried about the release that was like coming, I don't know, 2 weeks. So I had to be a bit unconventional, and I did automation tasks with API on the API level, and I used it like Postman. So we were like getting a level of confidence to do the release. So it was more about like, okay, how much confident we can be in this short time with which tool. So this is what we did for this other project, other company. It all depends on the project as well. seconds. I'm trying to avoid, but yeah.
Rafaela, just building on what you said there, because there's a comment about it as well in the chat there from a LinkedIn user. It says, would you not establish the groundwork for automation from conception? If automation is decoupled from product development, it's useless. And I think some of us are talking about a context where, like, week by week by week, the code base materially changes because you're in a startup environment, because things are throwaway or experimental or canary code. You can have an organization or a code base that just changes so fundamentally. If you write tests, all of your tests are going. So I think we're talking in that kind of context. Is that fair to say?
Yes, exactly. This script that I did on Postman, we knew from the beginning this is gonna be throwaway because we were doing specifically just to build the confidence and we could do the release. But yeah, it's something that you have to be. Yeah, you need to have that in mind. That some of the things that you do is just for different purpose, and yeah, you need to be able to let it go.
Which is why I think it's really important that when we talk about like automation, it's still something in our industry of that silver bullet that you have to have it. That if you don't have it in your testing, you're wrong. Context is really important. Some projects, some software either can't take or doesn't need a level of automation. It's worth being informed and having that sort of thinking in place, and whether or not you're exploring using tooling that could lead to automation, or if you're like coming up with a strategy because you know it's something fixed. We shouldn't like consider like every piece of work has to have automation or it's not. We should be more contextual and tailor what testing we're doing based on what makes sense.
Yeah, it's impossible to test everything.
I think what you said there is a great way to finish that first question and move on to the next. Context is important. We said it at the start, and you said it at the end there. I do see a lot of and talk to a lot of testers, obviously, and there's so much noise around tools.
Is it me?
Matt, no, it's Matt.
Okay.
he warned us this would happen. That
I know.
Yeah.
I'm back. Yeah. Hopefully you've got me now. Let me rattle on with this second question. So we obviously spoke about when and where, what to automate. Now we're looking at the tools themselves. Should we be regularly changing tools? Is it really necessary? There's lots out there, more and more all the time. Does it really matter that much if we to sort of keep speed with the market and change the tool? Rafaela, come to you first.
Yeah, I can. I don't think we should. Okay, this is my completely my opinion, of course, but yeah, I think this is really tricky because there is a cost when you change the you do the changing the test automation, and then the tool, and then you need to do a lot of kind of research and see if even like, I don't know, depending on the team that you have, if the developers are going to help as well, or is something that is just QA that because loads of company, they still have the mindset that it's just QA doing the automation. I have worked like in two different kind of teams and projects where I had help from the developers, so I had to consider them helping me with the automation as well and the code. And most of the time, I was the only one responsible to actually do the coding of the test automation. And then, then I don't need to worry about skills they have, and if they need to learn something new, it's just me. But yeah, you always need to consider like the costs and the time. You can see like banks, they still work with COBOL, if I'm not wrong, right? So imagine how much it would cost for them to like just switch everything to, I don't know, JavaScript or Python. That is too much. So you need to see where you are at, again, with the project and the team, what resources like you have when you're like doing this kind of change. But and also like there's like really good tools for different projects. I don't know. It's tricky. I usually don't change when I start with one. I just continue and I do the benchmark in the beginning of the project. I cannot think about one project that I had to change. Maybe when I was using Task Cafe and then we had to do Playwright, but then we had the research to actually start coding another script in parallel. But yeah, I don't know. Callum, did you?
Yeah, the way that I interpreted this question is about the chasing of new technology and the chasing of new tools, like looking to replace tried and tested tooling with the new cool technology, low code or generative AI tooling or so on. And I think something we need to remember is that a lot of the the boring old-fashioned tools that everyone uses are used because of the stability of them. With a lot of the new tools that exist, what libraries are they using? Are those libraries that are going to be deprecated? Are they libraries that are going to sort of like fall out of favor? Are they being maintained and so on? How long is the shelf life of these like smaller, newer tools? What security is in there as well? What vulnerabilities do they bring into things as well? And then other risks as well. So just the maintenance costs that may come from like using, newer tools, constantly trying to bring in the new thing. You're constantly the cognitive overhead of changing your ways of working. I think there's something to be said for understanding sort of the stability of your tool, how long it's going to be lasting. And using something that at the end of the day, you can Google problems or Stack Overflow those problems and get quick solutions to, rather than having to wait for sort of a new team to actually spin up a bespoke solution for you, or, switch over from a deprecated library to a library that's actually in use. So I don't think that it's always the best idea to just be chasing new tools all the time. Now, that's not to be said that we shouldn't innovate for things, and we should always try and run proof of concepts, but we need to have in the back of our mind, what are the risks to this tool? Is it solving a problem that we actually need solving in the long term? And if that dies, what's our transition plan to another tool as well? But what do you think, Bas?
I just want to Control-C, Control-V your answer.
Thank you.
No, but you hit on so many great. But the only thing, am I right in that you mainly reason from that your experience mainly with open source libraries and open source tools and
yes, potentially. Yeah.
So that's absolutely. There's this whole world of commercially licensed tools as well. Some of them are absolutely great. But one big problem with those kinds of tools is exactly what you mentioned, is how it's so, because just fewer people tend to use them. So finding answers to problems, if you're stuck, is, in my experience, generally a lot harder. And especially when the problems are a little bit more difficult or deep, or aren't just RTFM level kind of problems. It's so hard to find a good answer, or knowledgeable people who can actually help you solve that issue. So that's definitely one thing to take in mind. Other than that, changing tools just because you can, I think that's a really bad idea, but I'm just parroting what Rafaela and Callum already said there. So absolutely fine.
Sorry, Bas, sorry to interrupt, Bas. So on that first point, you're talking about the fact that you can find solace in using a bigger tool with a larger user base because you'll have a bigger support community for issues.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it, basically. Yeah. So, and that's generally harder to find with. Well, back in the days, there were dedicated forums for Quick Test Pro, but they, maybe they still exist. I've not been on them for 13, 14 years. I don't know, but But things like that it's just way easier to find solutions if you're using popular open source libraries, because, well, open source is free, right? There's no cost attached to them at all. Not at all. No, there is. Yeah, no, don't worry. But a lot more people tend to use it because the barrier of entry is just so much lower, which means there's lots more people figuring it out. It's just, and more people run into specific problems, which means there's also a higher chance that somebody else has stumbled upon that problem already and has a solution for it.
And then the other side of things is the social engineering, human factors side of this as well. So as like quality experts, we're usually the quality champion in our team. So I saw a guy in the chat talking about being a quality coach, which is a role that I've taken on as well. And one of the key things is like a quality coach, where you might be the only like quality expert working with other engineers to try and embed testing, embed quality practices, is being a trusted advisor. And if you keep moving the goalposts for what's our strategy? What are we aiming for? Oh, we're using this tool. Oh, no, wait, we're using this tool. Oh, no, wait, we're using this tool. You're going to frustrate your team members around you. You're just adding loads of technical debt that you're building on. They're going to stop listening to you, and you're going to lose your ability to influence. So although it's like, yay, cool new things, sometimes people just want a bit of stability and a bit of like, they can trust that like you're not just going to keep pushing, changing the goalposts on them. Like a thing that we hear as testers a lot is that our, bar to entry or our bar to quality is always too high anyway. And a way to really like give that impression is keep moving it constantly away from people. And by changing tools all the time or changing how we're talking about testing or our testing techniques, that's effectively what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. And that's probably relatable to, not just testing and not even tech, but giving any team a set of guidelines and processes to follow. If you're continually changing the guidelines and processes, then you're going to at some point lose their buy-in to some degree. And if you keep doing it, then you could lose them completely. So we've had a couple of other people who've sort of commented on this. So Jason, thanks for commenting, Jason. Wanting to use the next shiny tool has a cost, and until you have done an evaluation and worked out the cost benefit, then a decision shouldn't be made, because we've spoken about some of those costs there.
Yeah.
And then
my question back to Jason there is, how do you get a clear picture of that cost until you used it and until you have used it for a while? That's something I've been in these kinds of, what would be the cost and what would be the benefit? That's sometimes very hard to determine.
It is, yeah.
Well, would you do that through sort of talking to peers in industry and ex-colleagues potentially? Have you used this? What was your experience with?
Oh yeah, that's definitely one approach. And the other is that, once you've been around for a while, which I think all four of us can attest to, is you've seen many things and you've seen the differences. And so if one thing that experience or just being old, what it helps you doing is just see through all the shiny things of new tools pretty quickly and say, but this is something really new, or this is just basically a new way of marketing the same thing, or just a new abstraction layer on top of something that we've been using for ages already. So yeah, that's definitely helpful. So I used to be one of those persons who ran after the latest. It couldn't be shiny and new enough. But at some point, first of all, you just have to give up because there's so many of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's keeping changing and switching focus. It doesn't make you. It may generate some likes on social media if you continuously post on all the latest things every time, but in the end, businesses want a reliable
the job done.
They want the job done. Exactly, Rafaela. They want the job done, and if they bring me in, they are going to look at me and say, well, what should we use? And that is definitely not necessarily the latest shiny thing.
Yeah, everybody was like moving sorry, Callum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that everybody was talking about Playwright, and then I was like using Task Cafe at the time. I think it was something, or Cypress. Like all of these, they came like, and they are really similar to each other. But yeah, basically, they came quickly, and then I think Task Cafe is deprecated right now. I don't even know. But yeah, it's also really hard to keep up to date. I think the only thing that I would consider, I know that we talk about the stability and everything, but for example, how these more stable tools they are compared to tools that the devs they are using, because devs they have their own tools as well, and then they keep like updating all these, like using the latest one, now changing to TypeScript, and people are not using JavaScript anymore. So how it's something that you need to consider as well. Okay, we are gonna use a stable one, but we are gonna struggle with the new tools from the dev side. Just wanted to mention that. But yeah.
I'm just going to flash this question up that's coming from someone who's watching. This is Harry, who I've been talking to recently. So thanks for your question. What's the best approach for estimating ROI for automation? Is that another broad question? Quite broad, isn't it? Does anyone have
It's not a cruel one.
It is, yeah.
So, Rafaela, you want to go first again?
Yeah, I can. I would say maybe you put the cost of the hours that you have, that you charge, and then you put there with the hours of that you are spending with the automation setup, that through your experience. That is really tricky to ensure. I don't know even if I have done this before, but yeah, I would say I would go through that path initially.
I'd take a really different track from you there, Rafaela. I'd look at adoption and engagement as my metrics for return on investment, because I want this framework and tool to basically be used. Like, I can make an assumption that like if we add tests, then hopefully it will shake out some information that we can use. So the idea of like teams actually using that, building out the test suite, adopting it, maintaining it, and then the engagement with it. So if failing tests are found, are they being curated, deleted? Are they being updated? Are our test packs up to date? Do errors cause reverts in the merge process and fixes? That's how I would look at it. As basically like the adoption and the use of the information we get out of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you, Bas?
I struggle with this question a lot with the ROI. It's because automation really is just one piece of the puzzle there. It's about so much more than just and the way people tend to try and calculate that ROI is absolutely horrible. About, I've done these calculations, by the way. It takes me 4 hours to automate this test case. It takes me half an hour to run it manually, which means after running it 8 times, yay, profit.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. First, because for so many reasons. First of all, maintenance. Second of all, does it do the same thing? Third of all, maybe the best ROI would to just not test it in the first place. There's so many different, and it also floats on this false but somehow really persistent belief with some people that tools can do the same thing that humans do, which, well, they'll help us, they'll support us, they'll do some things for us more efficiently than we can, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have you done? I'm curious. Have you done any? Have you? Yeah. Have you asked it to calculate that?
I've been asked that question, and naive younger me filled all those Excel sheets with those calculations. But these days, it's I'm taking an approach that's very similar to what you said, Callum. That I want to see it being used. I wanted to see, does this produce value? What does this mean for? Can we get the information that we're looking for a little bit quicker here? How easy is this to adopt? There's so many things, but just a very hard ROIs. Well, I put in $10,000, and after 6 months, I'm pulling out 15, so I made money. Yay, ROI! It just doesn't work like that.
And that can be said for like a lot of testing or testing coaching, which is what I've been thinking about recently. Is like, how do you measure its impact? And sometimes the answer is like, it's a vibe. Like, do people feel like they've got more information? Do people feel that, releases have gone faster, or that they're more informed about things, or that there's more confidence in a release? Sometimes the return of investment is literally just a vibe rather than a number. And it's really hard to quantify. I mean, you can use surveys and so on to try and like track and make sure people are feeling that vibe. But it can just be this ephemeral thing, right?
Let's move on to the last question. So this is something that I know certainly a lot of the people that I talk to about jobs and employment ask me about regularly. So we're really fortunate, and again, thanks for coming on the panel today. So we've got 3 people who've got lots of experience, as we said. They're not old; they've got experience, and they've been working
I read
around
seasoned. That's a great way to put it.
That's a nice one.
Yeah.
So someone wants to learn more about test automation and get more exposure. Perhaps the scenario is that they work for an organization who, haven't adopted any automated tools yet. Where do they start? What support can they get from the community, from websites, etc.? What's the best thing they can do, you think, to sort of kick off their automation usage?
I would advocate for people to start with the what and not the how. Understand the types of testing that can be automated, the types of testing throughout the stack that can happen as well, and why we do all of these things. Recently, I shared an info post about like different types of testing, different types of automation through the stack, and the amount of like messages and feedback and comments I had where people just had never had the training to say, oh, that's what integration testing, or that's why we test at the API layer, or that's a business test or a feature test or a functional test. Start by understanding the landscape of what this is, so that then you can start to understand and piece it together. Because sometimes what we do is we jump into the how, and we jump into a tool with a language, and we've got a hammer. And then all we can do is smash things with that hammer. Everything has to be a nail. We can't be nuanced or tailored about things. We can't talk and work with other people on those things. That would be my first place to start. But right, both of you.
Matt, can you spotlight Lewis's last comment?
Yeah. See what.
Because I don't always agree with Lewis, but I definitely agree with him. Yes, I definitely agree with him on this one, because that whole step from doing testing to making automation a part of what you do as a tester is about all of these new skills and additional skills. They are development skills. You already have the testing skills. I'm going to assume, and I know assuming is a very bad thing to do as a tester, but I'm going to do it anyway, is that you already know how to do testing and how to do it well. But the automation step is development. And that's more than simply learning the syntax of a programming language. That's more than learning the syntax of a tool or library. It's about what you said, Callum, about finding ways to automate. Think about the what. I typically talk about the why, what, where, when, who, and then how. But the what is definitely a big part of that. Is at what scope, what level, what seams, what entry points, what interfaces do we have that we can leverage to get information about the state, the quality, and associated risks of our application of our software a little bit more efficiently. And those are development skills. So learn to do that, learn development skills. And again, that's more than program. Learn how the application that you've been testing from, that you've maybe mostly been testing from an end user perspective, learn how to look at that from a developer perspective. How are all these different components and systems and modules actually composed together to make up the product that we build and deliver? So that would be my first recommendation, and I just wanted to. I saw that coming up in the comments, so I thought that.
I'll just bring this up as well, because Richard's been on the panel previously, and we all know Richard. So he said, and I'm giving him his podcast a plug, obviously. So he said, you want to influence the quality of automation, stop being an SDET or QE, leave those roles to become a developer, which is what Lewis said, and what it sounds like Bas is agreeing with there as well.
Yep.
Rafaela, any view on how someone can get into automation?
Yeah, I would say is the same thing as Callum and Bas said. You definitely need to have this developer mindset. Even DevOps, they had to learn everything. And there is a website, I think is roadmap.sh, that you can go and you can check, they put like all the flows and everything that you can go through. I think Alexander also mentioned in the comments, actually. It's a really good one, and it's like open community, open source, and people, they go and just keep like adding more resources that you can, improve this part. Yeah, you definitely need to improve your development skills as part of, learning automation. In thinking, this extra layer that we need to have when we are doing automation is like, just massive.
The extra layer of development skills.
Development skills, that you need to build. And also, like, I think Bas already said, it's not only about the syntax, but also, solid principles, otherwise people are going to put everything. I have worked in some projects that was like spaghetti code, as we say, that is like one after another, or like over complexing. And so that is definitely like something that people need to learn when doing automation as well, because sometimes you think that it's just like, especially when you are recording and playing, right, you're just like putting everything there, and then you don't have this kind of base, and then it's gonna be hard to maintain.
Just on that point, sorry Cam, on the point around development skills, because it's obviously been mentioned by Lewis, Richard, Bas, and you now, Rafaela. And this might be me being naive, so apologies if it is, but with no-code tools, is it still a requirement that if you want to get into automation, you become a developer or enhance your development skills? What implication are the use of no-code tools to that?
I was going to actually advocate for a route into automation that was much less like code specific, which is how I got into automation. I'm not going to advocate for low code tools with no coding skills, because you have to be able to maintain and look at actually what's generated and understand how that's not going to, be a dumpster fire and a maintenance problem for you down the line. But something that I found that is really good is Postman. If you can, let's say you are a tester that has focused on the UI layer and business logic, if you can move towards the use of Postman and using JSON queries. If you can use SQL, if you're an old school tester and you can use SQL and you can look at databases, you can probably get your head around Postman queries and JSON, right? Once you've got those and you've got some queries set out to make requests and to get responses, they have a lot of snippets that you can use to then start asserting tests against those. So you can start saying, did it respond with this? Did it respond with this field? What about chaining these things together? There are then tools that will allow you to actually start running those tests as part of a pipeline. This doesn't require you to have a lot of JavaScript or C# or Python, or Ruby or any sort of scripting or coding languages, but it does start giving you the idea of being a bit closer to the code, a bit more, and also being able to run via a tool some of that testing. That's where I would recommend. And I say Postman because, again, it's tried and tested. It's at a level that I think that people who are probably not used to being closer to the code would start to understand a bit more, and it's quite user friendly. And unlike a low code or a no code solution, you have more control over what it's outputting.
Right.
So my answer typically to this is you're using a tool to automate the execution of instructions that you give to other software. How is that not still programming? Just because the syntax is different. So instead of typing public static void main something, I'm now maybe dragging and dropping building blocks and connecting them via arrows, or using any kind of abstraction layer on top of it. I'm still doing development work. So that's also why, and maybe that's me personally, but no code and codeless, I think it's a horrible thing, because it promises things that it cannot live up to. Cue all kinds of raging comments in the feed, but that's my I'll still need a certain kind of technical / development skills, even though I'm not actually writing JavaScript, C#, Python code, whatever. No, I'm doing this through some kind of. We used to do the exact same thing with punch cards. Now you can say I'm old. But it is still, we're still providing instructions to software, in this case to test other software. So how is that not development? I don't know.
Yeah, I just realized I'm gonna just share my own journey when I came to automation. Basically, I started as a QA manual, just doing exploratory tests most of the time. Then I started with an record and play Selenium. That was a plugin on the browser, and this is how I started. And then I start to just learn how to customize the code and also how to organize the things, because of course these record and play, they come with like loads of things, and it's like I don't know, maybe 100 lines of like click, and then you need to organize things, because then you want the code to be reusable as well and maintainable. But yeah, this is how I got into test automation. Basically, was through record and play. Yeah, and HTML. I had a bit of, because I had this during my high school. So I learned a bit of HTML, which is easy to start like coding, I think.
Let me fire up this question that's come through. It's slightly off topic from that question that we were looking at there, but it's again one that I've come across in.
He's frozen again.
Sorry. How can you host shows when you've got a bad Wi-Fi? I think I'm back now. I just want to ask this question: Is it good? Thank you. Is it good practice to write an automation suite in the same programming language that is used by the development team? For example, for the UI suite, I might write using C#, NUnit, Selenium, but would I be okay to write the mobile suite, for example, using Appium and Java? Anyone got any kind of views on that?
I have. I always recommend to do that, because then you bring the developers, helping. Is such a good collaboration. Like they also like are able to maintain the code. And there was a point that we didn't have this role like super clear, because I was even helping with the coding as well. But of course we had like, this is my experience. I have more like, of course, I'm more expert on the QA and the quality side and personal development. But it was such a nice collaboration between the teams, because you can have this kind of and of course you're sharing knowledge and of these. So you kind of know already when the person changes something, you need to update. And this is when I was also even doing some kind of TDD and the coding and the automation at the same time. I was coding, the developer was coding the platform. So I do recommend, but of course, it's not always the case. Sometimes you need to change that. But if you can, and if you have, you can bring your, the developers to help you. I always like push forward to that. I ask Callum, I think he also advocates. And
I was just going to +1 to everything you said. Like you want people to know your code base, and then you want your test to be discoverable, inheritable, learnable, and your tests help debug the system if it goes wrong. Like sometimes we forget that like these tests get run like on the path to production, right? They should, and potentially there could be health checks for things. We need to make sure that like who's on support can read these tests and understand clearly and quickly that's the problem, and then they can solve it and fix it. Because if you're at 3 a.m. and you're supporting a live product and it fails and the tests are failing, you want quick responses and answers. You don't want to have to spend hours trying to reinterpret a different language in a different framework. So I would say definitely, I echo everything you say there. Rafaela.
Yeah, it's I share that too, but I do want to share, and this is anecdotal evidence, but there's one very successful company here in the Netherlands. I shall not name them. That's the only example that I've got that I've worked with, is they explicitly chose a different language for their automation compared to the product that they wrote, and they are really successful here.
Mm-hmm.
But they said, well, we want the best tools for the job, and we feel that in their case, their application was built in Java and their automation is built in Python. So everybody knew how to code. That wasn't the problem. But they said, well, we want that critical distance, and we want people to think in terms of business behavior rather than technical behavior. And they said, well, to enforce that, or to stimulate that, we are going to require the automation to be written in a different language than and they are successful doing that. I'm not saying that everybody should, because I'm all for everything that Rafaela and Callum basically said about collaboration and those kinds of things, which is just way easier when you work in not just in the same language, but also in the same code base, the same repository.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
So please do that. But a lot of it, and this is the first one I'm going to say it. It depends. Only took me 59 minutes. Yay! No, but there's cases to be made for both sides. Really.
Yeah, but
in general, I would recommend. Sorry, Rafaela. In general, I would recommend. Well, if you're starting with a blank slate, just use what the developers use, because it's development, and you want them to use it as well, and you want it to run on the same infrastructure. You want everybody to be able to collaborate to it, to contribute to it. So probably a good idea. Sorry, Rafaela, you wanted to say something.
No.
Yeah, Rafaela, come in with one final thought. I'm just conscious
Yeah,
of time because we are slightly related.
Yeah, I was
Please go
just
ahead.
gonna reply because he gave like an example, and this is actually a good example that sometimes I also had to do that. So the UI task had to be like in one language you want to completely different from the mobile, which these two is really hard to use the same kind of language most of the time. So yeah, some cases you cannot actually. So it is what it is.
It looks like we've solved his question. So thanks a lot. Appreciate the response. So it's a light bulb moment. So, and we've had lots of other really positive comments in the chat. So we are at the end now. Thank you all so much for watching, and obviously, most of all, thanks to the panel for sharing their time prepping for it as well. Really appreciate it. And it's been brilliant. You can see the contributions in that chat there, which goes to show what it's meant to the people who've watched. So thanks again. You can watch it on YouTube. That'll be available tomorrow morning. We are going to do another one on automation. It's going to be about the inclusion of AI functionality and automation tools and how that might change the landscape of using these products. And that's going to be in early October. Look at this. Look at
I'm
this.
definitely gonna join. Yeah.
Do you know what? We've got through that entire session, and I don't know whether we've used the word AI until now, which is actually quite remarkable. But that's going to be probably in the first week of October. So if I can ask the panel just to stay with me for a second, I'm going to end the recording now. So thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much, y'all.
Bye. Thanks.